broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the world. The rains you fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, from incompleteness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Welcome to a Sunday morning service brought to you by the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Georgetown, Texas. I am the minister of this congregation right now. My name is Sandy Ingham, and you might be watching this anytime, not necessarily on Sunday morning, the 3rd of May. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever time you tune in, you are most welcome here. This church is a welcoming congregation and a green sanctuary. If you would like to find out more about Unitarian Universalism in general, visit uua.org. And to learn more about this congregation in particular, go to sangabrieluu.org, SANGABRIELUU.org. Don't forget to read The Messenger. Yes, our newsletter has a name now. You will find in that newsletter information about how the church is doing in this time of crisis, and you'll find out some other things too. We welcome any feedback you might wish to offer about the newsletter and also about our website. Today's chalice lighting words were written by Leslie Pohl Cosbaum. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom, we strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. Please sing along if you want to at home or wherever you might be to the opening hymn. If you have a hymnal, it's hymn number 309, and its title is Earth is Our Homeland. The opening words were written by Barbara Pescan. For the beauty of the earth, this spinning blue-green ball, yes. Gaia, mother of everything, we walk gently across your back to come together again in this place to remember how we can live, to remember who we are, to create how we will be. Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live. Welcome us. Sometimes we will say the words of the affirmation together, but at other times you'll be invited to sing the words if you are so inclined. Last week they were sung, and maybe the week before that, who knows? We've lost so much. We've lost track of time so much. So today let's say them together, and I have to confess that I don't know if the words will be on your screen or not, but either way, join me now as you are able, if you remember them or have order of service at home. Here are those familiar words. The doctrine of this church is love. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. Well, hello, Karina. I know what you have in that wonder box that you have at home, but I wonder what our audience will guess might be in there. I know that everyone is going to enjoy today's story, no matter what age our viewers happen to be.
Thank you, Sandy, and good morning, San Gabriel. It's lovely to be with you this morning. Do I have a wonder box with me today? Yes, I do. What could our wondering minds be doing to help us learn and grow as we think about what might be in here? Please make a guess. There's not any sound coming out, so I don't know if that's a clue or not a clue.
Oh, I think I know what it is.
You think you know what it is and there's not even anything to give you a clue?
Yeah,
What do you think is inside here?
air.
Air! Well, there is definitely some air inside this box. That is for sure. You are not wrong. Roland, do you want to make a guess as to what might be in the wonder box today? No clues? What did you say?
The book.
Oh, the book we're going to have as the story? That's a very good guess, but I wonder what it really is. Okay, so I'm going to get ready to open it. It's my beat up old box, and can you see what that is in there?
Flower.
Yeah. And last Sunday, when we were talking about the gifts of the earth that we were grateful for, I had mentioned flowers. I think I talked about water to swim in and flowers to smell and all those lovely things. So the book is called All the World, and it's by Liz Garton Scanlon, and she lives in Austin. She wrote this book. Rock, stone, pebble, sand, body, shoulder, arm, hand. A moat to dig, a shell to keep. All the world is wide and deep. Hive, bee, wings, hum, husk, cob, corn, yum, tomato blossom, fruit so red, all the world's a garden bed. Tree, trunk, branch, crown, climbing up and sitting down. Morning sun becomes noon blue, all the world is old and new. Road, street, track, path, ship, boat, wooden raft. Nest, bird, feather, fly, all the world has got its sky. Slip, trip, stumble, fall, tip the bucket, spill it all. Better luck another day, all the world goes round this way. Table, bowl, cup, spoon, hungry tummy, supper's soon. Butter, flour, big black pot. All the world is cold and hot. Spreading shadows, setting sun, crickets, curtains, day is done. A fire takes away the chill. All the world can hold quite still. Nanas, papas, cousins, kin, piano, harp, and violin, babies passed from neck to knee, all the world is you and me. Everything you hear, smell, see, all the world is everything. Everything is you and me. Hope and peace and love and trust, all the world is all of us. So that story reminds me of one of our principles. Does anybody know which principle I might be thinking of? There's 7 of them. And the last one.
7.
Yes, the 7th one. The 7th one is about the interconnected web of all life, that we are all connected to each other, like a spider's web. So the earth and the sky and the rain and the water and the people and the animals and the plants all rely on each other and depend on each other. And that's one of the things that we talk about with Earth Day, and that we don't do things just by ourselves. We do them together. And so we'll talk more about that in our RE time together at 2 p.m. I hope to see you there. Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Karina. I watched the video of that story, All the World, more than once. It is a beautiful book, and the drawings are fantastic. So I think this book has now become one of my favorite books for all ages. Please join me now in a moment of silence, followed by a brief musical meditation. I do have a reading today, and I probably neglected to say that I titled my reflections for today, Going Home. I realize that if you haven't necessarily seen the newsletter, where the title would be, you don't have an order of service. Maybe you do. I don't know what anyone has. Thinking Like a Stone by Unitarian Universalist minister Kathleen McTighe. She writes, one moment. Trying something new today. Trying to see the words. Thinking like a stone. My Aunt Mary, writes Kathleen McTeague, has lived alone much of her life in a little prospector's cabin far inside the boundaries of Yellowstone Park as a park biologist. She's a bit eccentric and also remarkably wise to the ways of the earth. For as long as I can remember, she has said that she thinks like a stone. She doesn't mean that she sits around listening to rocks as they wax eloquent in subtle, gravelly voices. She means that she has learned to anchor herself in geologic time. She observes the seasons keenly as they come and go, but she is tuned into rhythms that are unfathomably long. Sweeps of time that the stones know, counted not by years or even centuries, but by eons. This gives my Aunt Mary an unshakable equanimity, right alongside her passion for the environment. She works tirelessly against the earth's degradation, but she thinks like a stone. And in geologic time, trees are a recent invention. The dinosaurs came and went just last week, and the whole span of human life has happened in the blink of a stony eye. With her consciousness anchored in this long and rocky view, my aunt says that the planet will survive us, no matter what we do, and will live well past our extinction. That's what gives rise to her serenity. I find it very hard to think like a stone, writes McTeague. I think like a human being, like a mother who wants to believe that her great-grandchildren will have a green earth to walk on, sweet air to breathe, the chance to see an osprey fishing in a lake, and to hear peepers trill out their awakening in the spring. However, this is where my aunt's wisdom might nevertheless wear off on me. If we can learn to think like a stone, then we might learn to think as though we are truly a part of the planet, instead of merely living on it. We might learn to see with a sort of double vision that allows us our love and loyalty to our own kin, but stretches us beyond them as well. With that dual vision, we can start to live as though it is not human life that should be the measure of all things. It is the planet's life. We might learn not only to think like a stone, but to also think like an American chestnut or an elm, to think like a peeper, a cicada, a hawk, or a red fox, a vulture, a coral reef, or an Amazon butterfly. We might come to believe that their lives on Earth actually matter as much as our own. Thinking like a stone, we begin to know the truth at a bone-deep level that we are not living on the Earth. We are the Earth, as everything else is the Earth, rising into life in wild, extravagant variety, and all made of the same handful of minerals, chemicals, and salty water, into which we will dissolve when we die. We are the Earth made conscious, a unique and marvelous way in which the Earth itself can see, reflect, contemplate, and choose. The stones of our planet have been around for a long, long time, and they will be here as long as our bright little jewel of an Earth keeps spinning around the sun. If we want life to continue blossoming among those stones, we've got to take on their long view and then use our marvelous large brains to benefit the bright planet that gave rise to them in the first place. If we want life to continue blossoming among those stones, we've got to take on their long view and then use our marvelous large brains to benefit the bright planet that gave rise to them in the first place. Can we humans do that? Can we survive the current catastrophe with more survival knowledge in those marvelous large brains and transfer that knowledge to the next big fight, saving Mother Earth? In a recent issue of the New Yorker magazine, I read a short story titled Love Letter, written by George Saunders. It gave me chills. The letter was written by a grandfather to his grandson, Robbie, in response to an email that Robbie had written his grandfather, asking for advice, but also gently berating his grandparents. Robbie's in his early 20s. Berating his grandparents and his parents for not doing more to prevent what was happening in the United States and in other parts of the world. The letter is dated February 22nd, 200 blank. 200 blank. A close friend of Robbie's, an immigrant, a legal immigrant, was taken away for speaking out against the government. The rule of law is being rapidly dismantled. They change the laws constantly to suit their own beliefs, the grandfather writes. Civil liberties are continually being suspended or destroyed. Lawyers, judges, prosecutors, defense lawyers were being imprisoned in alarming numbers at alarming rates. But Robbie still wanted to protest. He wanted to go out on the streets, organize a march with his friends, and protest. His grandfather was frightened for him. His grandfather writes, "History, when it arrives, may not look as you expect based on the reading of history books. Things in there are always so clear. One knows exactly what one would have done." The letter ends with this sentence: "In this, you are, and I am, I hope, like cave people, sheltering a small remaining trace of fire through a dark period." Although this story's focus is on an increasingly dictatorial government and a scary, immoral family dynasty, now into its third presidential term, the subject matter could be any number of things, including, or maybe most especially, the fight to save the environment. Listen to that sentence again. "In this, you are, and I am, I hope, like cave people, sheltering a small remaining trace of fire through a dark period." Humanity has a much bigger problem than the coronavirus and the economic woes caused by our trying to defend ourselves against that virus. The bigger challenge is, will we take what we are learning about how we are all in this crisis together and apply that knowledge to slow global warming and to correct the trajectory that climate change is currently blindly following? As I wrote in this week's newsletter column, I have a hope, and I hope it is not mere fantasy, that on the other side of the coronavirus, humanity will continue to pause before hitting that reset button on how to proceed with, quote, normal life. I want us to pause long enough to give serious, intentional thought to how we can take the lessons learned from the virus and the economic collapse and apply them to the real threat to humanity, global warming. Won't the new normal be meaningless if we fail to recognize that fact? Or will we forget too quickly how fragile life is on planet Earth, the only planet we have for living our lives at this moment in time? Will we literally go back to life as it was BCV, before coronavirus? And I used what to me is a frightening example, continuing to dismantle environmental protections that have served us well ever since that first Earth Day. Will we dismiss those phrases that seem to be everywhere right now? You know what I mean. We are one. We are all in this together. We are one people. Together, we will get through this crisis. I did a double take the first time that I heard the sentence, "We are one people," used in a television commercial. I am pretty sure that it was a commercial for a car, of all things. Though I was so stunned to hear one of Unitarian Universalists' basic beliefs being used to sell something, but I didn't pay any attention to the rest of the ad. To be effective, change will have to be systemic. We have to change the narrative, change the story of humanity. Economist, professor, and writer David Corton and many others have spent a great part of their adult lives trying to do that. And I believe that it isn't an either-or situation, but a both-and situation. To save ourselves and our planet, we will need to make decisions that affect both individual lifestyle choices and the global view. When enough people understand that we are all connected and interdependent, real change will begin. Once we get that critical mass of folks, we can start working together, thus changing the human story. I had intended to talk today about people who are working hard, and have been for years, to do something about climate change. Last week I mentioned Bill McKibben, for example, and I was going to talk more about him today. I was also hoping to tell you some of Sister Miriam McGillis's story and Genesis Farm, which she founded. I will do these things at another time, but right now I hope to touch your hearts and your spirits. I don't want to be only in head mode today. By that I mean, we often discuss the problem of climate change only in intellectual terms, trying to be super rational and incredibly logical and sensible about this seemingly overwhelming problem. Then we neglect the hard part. We neglect the simplest yet most profound aspects of global warming. This simple yet profound knowledge that we humans have to grasp before systemic change will happen was effectively and elegantly expressed in today's Wonder Box story, All the World by Liz Garton Scanlon. All the world is wide and deep. All the world is old and new. All the world goes round this way. All the world is cold and hot. All the world can hold quite still. All the world is you and me. All the world is everything. Everything is you and me. Hope and peace and love and trust. All the world is all of us. We have to teach our children these truths. Just as importantly, we then have to make certain that as our children grow older, they do not forget the wonder and awe that Mother Earth offers us. Here's something that I once wrote about my childhood. Then, growing up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, I lived outside as much as possible. River, creek, the hills and woods. And I thought that this was how the whole world was. Green, lush, full of so many trees and streams and rivers and creeks that we of course called cricks. surely one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I thought every place was just like this. And in that then time, in those days of my childhood, I thought that there would always be trees and hills and woods and streams and lakes, and this kind of beauty would abide forever. That was then. This is now. It's true what Sigurd Olsen wrote. While we are born with curiosity and wonder, and our early years are full of the adventure they bring, I know such inherent joys are often lost. I also know that being deep within us, their latent glow can be fanned to flame again by awareness and an open mind. What can we do to fan that latent glow back into flame? What can we do to ensure that we don't get stuck in despair over this world? We can continue to educate ourselves, to learn more about McKibben's work, Sister Miriam McGillis's farm, David Corton's writings about changing the narrative of human life, Joanna Macy's studies on the importance of our cosmologies. And I will be sharing all of this with you during some of the weeks to come. We can recognize our feelings about Mother Earth. We can allow ourselves to be touched by those feelings, to weep when we must, to get teary-eyed a lot. We should be getting teary-eyed a lot. We should be allowing ourselves to be angry enough to use that anger for protests, for letter writing, for whatever is necessary for fighting this fight. In the blurb that I wrote about these remarks, I said that I find myself using the phrase going home in an entirely different way since the beginning of the current crisis. The phrase I want to go home keeps popping up in my head, often followed by I want my mother, which is perhaps irrational. She's not been on this planet for some time. But as the well-known African-American spiritual expresses it, sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long, long way from home. I ask these questions of myself. What do I mean? What do I want? I mean that I want a place of comfort, security, safety. Deep down, I'm not talking about the space where I currently live and pay money to do so. I mean a place that can shelter and protect me from the current storms of virus and economic collapse. I wrote that there are two places where I expect to receive such refuge: church and Mother Earth. Those places renew my spirit. Because of those places, I don't stop at despair. I acknowledge it. I work through it. I am renewed, energized, determined again to be a voice for the earth. What can we do to keep alive those inherent joys Sigurd Olsen wrote about so that we don't lose our love of life and our respect for Mother Earth? What can we do to keep these latent glows burning and to fan them into flame again using those tools of awareness and an open mind? Remember this from McTeague's reading: if we want life to continue blossoming among those stones, we've got to take on their long view, and then we use these marvelous large brains to benefit the bright planet that gave rise to them in the first place. This is what we humans must do right now as we try to find a way to tame the virus and then begin the task of rebuilding the economy. We must rekindle the latent glow of curiosity and wonder that we are born with. We have to reset everything. We have to think of how to have robust economies without depending on fossil fuels. We already know how to do this. We have not yet figured out how to find the will to make systemic changes. I don't understand the current scare stories and hullabaloo about meat shortages. There is such a simple solution. Don't eat meat, or eat a lot less of it. Cows are one of the major contributors to global warming. And here's a win-win solution to address that. Do you know that story about the babies in the river? It is an old story, and there are several variations on it. Here is one of them. Once upon a time, there was a small village on the edge of a river. Life in the village was busy. There were people growing food and people teaching the children to make blankets and people making meals. One day, a villager took a break from harvesting food and noticed a baby floating down the river toward the village. She couldn't believe her eyes. She heard crying in the distance and looked downstream to see that two babies had already floated by the village. She looked around at the other villagers working nearby. Does anybody else see that baby? She asked. One villager heard the woman but continued working. Well, yes, yelled a man who had been making soup. Oh, this is terrible. A woman who had been building a campfire shouted, look, there are even more upstream. Indeed, there were 3 more babies coming around the bend. Well, how long have these babies been floating by? Asked another villager. No one knew for sure, but some people thought they might have seen something in the river earlier, but they were busy at the time, and they did not have time to investigate. Well, they quickly organized themselves to rescue the babies. Watchtowers were built on both sides of the river, and swimmers were coordinated to maintain shifts of rescue teams that maintained 24-hour surveillance of the river. Zip lines with baskets attached were stretched across the river to get even more babies to safely quickly. The number of babies floating down the river only seemed to increase. The villagers built orphanages, and they taught even more children to make blankets, and they increased the amount of food they grew to keep the babies housed, warm, and fed. And life in the village carried on. Then one day, at a meeting of the village council, a villager asked, where are all these babies coming from? No one knows, said another villager, but I say we organize a team to go upstream and find out who is throwing these babies in the river. Well, not everyone was in agreement with that. We need people to help us pull the babies out of the river, said one villager. That's right, said another villager, and who will be here to cook for them and look after them if a bunch of people go upstream? The council chose to let the village decide. And that's where this version of that story ends. If you were a villager, what would your vote be? Do you send a team upstream? Systemic change. Systemic change. I hope that we humans very soon begin to truly understand what systemic change means as opposed to band-aid approaches to the huge problem of a rapidly warming Mother Earth. More about that too in future reflections. Right now, let your hearts be touched as I end my remarks with these words from some wise people who knew what humanity's most important job is: to love all life, to do everything possible to protect all life, to pass it on safely and robustly from generation to generation. From John Burroughs, I am in love with this world. I have nestled lovingly in it. I have climbed its mountains, roamed its forests, sailed its waters, crossed its deserts, felt the sting of its frosts, the oppression of its heats, the drench of its rains, the fury of its winds, and always have beauty and joy waited upon my goings and comings. And from Sigurd Olson, awareness is becoming acquainted with environment, no matter where one happens to be. People do not suddenly become aware or infused with wonder. It is something we are born with. No child need be told its secret. She or he keeps it until the influence of gadgetry and the indifference of teenage satiation extinguish its intuitive joy. And this from Wendell Berry. And the world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles, no matter how long, but only by a spiritual journey. A journey of 1 inch, very arduous and humbling and joyful, by which we arrive at the ground at our feet and learn to be at home. And to close my remarks, an Indian proverb, one of my favorites. The frog does not drink up the pond in which it lives. May it be so. It is time for the closing hymn now, Blue Boat Home. We extinguish this flame of this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. The closing words are titled Web and were written by the poet Denise Levertov. Intricate and untraceable, weaving and interweaving, dark strand with light, designed beyond all spiderly contrivance to link, not to entrap. Elation, grief, joy, contrition, entwined, shaking, changing, forever forming, transforming. All praise to the great web. Go in peace and love.